From the racing capital of the world, Indianapolis, Indiana, welcome to the greatest spectacle in podcasting, the Seventh Gear Overrev Show, presented to you by our great friends and partners over at KrausMeats.com, purveyors of the finest artisan handcrafted meats and sausages in all of North America, as well as our great friends over at Respect Your Package and Dick Carriers, makers of those ultra high-end premium men's underwear. We appreciate both of their support of our show. And this week, folks, we've got a fantastic guest, one of the guys I've been looking to talk to for a long time since we met earlier this year. He's kind of a local boy. We share some similarities there in that we're both close to the Audubon Country Club, him being a member there with his folks, as well as my former tenure there as the assistant track manager. But I'd like to welcome to the show our friend, good friend of the show, the driver of the number 48 Abel Motorsports Indy NXT vehicle, the one and only Mr. Jordan Missig. Jordan, welcome to the Seventh Gear Overrev Show, man. Thanks for coming on. How are you?
Hi, Kevin. Thank you for having me on board. I'm a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to being able to talk with you and being on the show.
This is something I've not had enough time to chat with you. I know, when I saw you at the beginning of the year back at the April test at the Speedway, you were kind of busy, working through stuff. And then obviously the race season gets going and, then you finish the season up and it's like, okay, let's take a little downtime. But man, let's talk a little bit about this 2025. Imagine as a driver, you're just never satisfied. Even though you finished in the top 10 in points, you've had some flashes there. You had some frustrations, some contact throughout the season, all kinds of stuff. Talk me through how the season started and kind of how it evolved through the end of the season and when you finished up in
Well, I'm
Nashville.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, just like any other race car driver, we have moments of brilliance, I would say, where we shine through the light and everything. But we also have moments of disappointment, I guess you can say, that comes through it, to where we wish we could go back on things and think we could have done better. I would say there's probably like three or four races I think I could have done better with, where I finished outside the top 15. And I probably think, if I had finished where I thought I was realistically able to finish, I probably would have gained maybe a couple extra points here and there. I think realistically, if I look at our season as a whole, probably seventh or eighth in the championship was probably achievable. But I have to look back on it and look at the whole positives of everything that we did from the start of the season, with St. Petersburg basically finishing sixth as our best result of the season, and then carrying that through the whole rest of the season. We started on a high, finishing at sixth, and think we had potentially top podiums that were in the works. But as you know, in racing, the competition just gets harder and it gets tougher as the season goes on, as drivers start to get more acquainted with the cars and getting more tuned with chemistry with their engineers. So, we kind of struggled a little bit halfway through the year, but we started hitting our stride towards the very end. And I think, coming away with the ninth place finish is very close to where I realistically think we probably could have ended off if we had somewhat of a perfect season, in my eyes, I would say, from a realistic standpoint. So to be very close to that, I'd say, is a win in our books. But now it's also something that we get to shoot for next year. We get a goal to set. The bar is now set to what we need to do better than. And if we can achieve those goals, obviously, still the goal is the same way as it was this year. Get a top five, get some podiums now, and hopefully even a win on our hands, and we'll be in some good shape for next year.
Well, exactly, because now you've kind of got that first full season baseline, right? Because you had a partial season with Abel last year, and then this was your first full season. So I think back to when I met up with your folks and saw you there at the April test at the Speedway. Being that was your early season test there, what was sort of the plan of attack? What were you trying to work on through those multiple sessions with all of the other Indy NXT drivers there at that time, working through what they were working through? What was your plan of attack at that point?
Well, obviously, coming into the test and everything, it's obviously April, so it's what, 2 months into the season since we started back in February. For me, it was kind of just try to improve on my balance, improve on what we started off with in the season. And I think, obviously progression is the name of the game. If we're not progressing, then obviously we're doing something wrong, either it's as a team or as a driver standpoint. So we always want constant progression. And that's one of the things I strive for, whether it's inside the car, in the gym, or just in my physical fitness and self and physical fatigue. Is to have constant progression, always building on something. So if we could see that, then we know the process that we're trying to put forward is going in the right direction. Now, the determination of how fast the process is going is going to determine on how our success rate is always going. So if we're finding ourselves, upwards towards the front end of the field, like we kind of like to see ourselves, then obviously we're doing well at it. But I think, we have to look at things also from a realistic standpoint, that given it's my first year and first season in the car, and I wasn't traditionally like most guys coming from, the yeah, coming from open wheel ladder racing, but not going straight from a USF Pro 2000 car, jumping straight into an Indy Next car. I had a kind of a little bit of a year gap in between having to do radical sports cars as some form of racing because we just didn't have the budget to go straight to Indy Next. So to go from a USF Pro 2000 car, then having to take a step back or two to go to a radical 1500, and then having to take the 2 or 3 steps up to get back into an Indy Next car is a big change. Now, yeah, I'm no foreigner to it all. I knew kind of what I was getting myself into, but the process and the changeover probably took a little bit longer time than most kids who are going straight from a USF Pro 2000 into the Indy Next car because you have that time of recalibration and time of also readapting that you have to do. And I think that's kind of what makes the drivers, stems good drivers away from the bad drivers, are the ones that can do it pretty quickly and make those adjustments and, go on the fly versus the ones who are going to need to take a little bit of time or just sometimes can never get it because that's what stems the great from the best. I would say are the ones that are able to adapt, are able to understand, and are able to go out there and perform at their very best when they need to versus the ones that you know have to take multiple years to be able to understand it and get it. And unfortunately, there's going to be some guys that just don't get it. So that's why this year, I think coming into 2026 is going to be a pivotal year for us, given that it's year two and we now know what the car is capable of doing. And I think, showing the progression that I had throughout the course of this season and how we ended off the season, I think we can put ourselves in the conversation of, top five contenders or even potentially even a podium finish here and there throughout the season.
I gotcha. And for those of you seventh gear overhead fans that aren't that familiar, Jordan, let's just, even though he said he took a step or two back by doing the Radical Cup stuff, let's just be clear here. This dude's fast. He went to the World Finals in Dubai. So this dude is got some speed behind him for sure. But so one of the things I was always curious about, Jordan, is obviously, and I feel like, I was lucky enough to test and back when it was called Indy Lights before they renamed it Indy Next, but it
Mhm.
seems like now the series is really starting to grow. The depth of talent is getting deeper and deeper. I mean, you saw guys like Hauger come in, and I don't know how he dominated the way he did this season, but you've got that powerhouse team. You've got Ganassi talking about expanding, their program. Abel, you guys ran 4 cars. You had James Rowe finally got his first win in Iowa. All those kinds of things. What was it about Abel that made you decide to run with them as opposed to any of the other teams that are running Indy Next?
Well, this stems up a conversation that I kind of had with Miles. Oddly enough, back in 2023, around Coda time, this was kind of on the verge when he was doing his championship bid run in the USF Pro 2000 Championship when we were both teammates back in Pabst. And we were both in the conversation in the car ride. We were talking to each other, like we were discussing what teams we should go to and what options are out there for the future in 2024. And we obviously knew that Andretti was going to be filled up. Obviously, Andretti's one of the top teams to beat and to be there in the Indy Next Series. Plus, when you're at a caliper team like Andretti, everyone strives to be on Andretti just because of the connections they have to go from the Indy Next ladder system over to the IndyCar guys, and plus the IndyCar guys are right there. And half those guys, like Colton Herta and Kyle Kirkwood, are Indy Lights or Indy Next champions who have driven these cars. So to
Sure.
have the data, to have the conversation, the knowledge that they have, I mean, why that's the team you want to kind of be on in that sense. And that's the benchmark you want to be able to kind of compare yourself to. So when we started realistically looking at teams to what to go for, there's two options. You can either go with HMD, who was expanding to around 8 cars at the time, or you can go
It's
to a
nuts
team
to
like
me,
Abel
by the way.
Motorsports. Yeah, it's crazy and how they're able to operate that way. I don't know why how they're able to make that happen. But credit to Mike Marini to be able to make that team operation happen to them over at HMD. But I think, and then you also look at what Abel Motorsports at the time was, just a 2 car team, more family ran team, which I think was more suited for what me and Miles were kind of coming from, given that we were both PAPS racing drivers at the time. So when he made that, I told him, I said, I think, out of the two teams of HMD and Abel, I think you got to go with Abel. I told him, and it was kind of funny when he made the decision to go to HMD in 2024, and we eventually then towards the end of the season convened with each other back in Able in 2025. I told him, I said, what did I tell you back in 2003 when we were in the car at Coda, what team to go for? We'd end up being at Able, and next thing you know, we're both at Able when we joined the season. So he was like, dude, you were right. And I don't know how, but you do it. And I was like, yeah, that's just the platform and the team based, the system that they have, that Bill Abel and John Bruner run over there, is right in our wheelhouse than how we want to operate as. And it's just something that we gel to, we strive off of. And I think that was something that once I got onto Abel, and I knew Jacob back from the FR America days, when we raced against each other back in 2020 and 2021. So we've known the Abels for quite some time. And we just felt like the time was right to get in contact with John Bruner and Bill Abel about joining their program and joining their team. And this is also when they're coming on board as becoming a winning program and a winning team. So if you're going to give yourself the best shot, you got to go after the best team that feels like it's out there. And I think Abel is now coming into their stride as becoming one of the best teams in Indy next.
Well, I don't disagree with that. And I mean, John Bruner, that dude's a smart guy. And I remember him from back in the day when I was running open wheel cars. So is we'll get into more of the details here of the team in particular moving into 2026. But are there within the team, engineering wise, whatever, do you foresee any changes between now and whether it's the test you got coming up in a couple of weeks or the season opener next what April, I guess it is February, March.
I mean, yeah, from my standpoint, it's going to be a little bit different. Obviously, my guys are going to be relatively the same. With Max Garcia coming on board now, going to be obviously the USF Pro 2000 champion, and has a little bit of Penske affiliation, I guess you could say. That's coming to the fold. My team's going to pretty much be the same. I'm going to be switching engineers though, so that's the one thing that's going to be a little bit different on my end. But it's going to be with my one of my old engineers, Doug, who's going to be actually. I was with him back in 2021 when I was racing FR America, so it's actually nice to be back with somebody that has a little bit of chemistry with, and somebody I've been able to work with before and have known over the years. So we know what our style kind of is right off the bat, and we kind of know what we've are kind of like from each other. So we can be able to hit the ground running. Basically, there's going to be obviously some developmental time in between there, but we've known each other like now for the last couple of years. So I think we know where our sets and balances are, and we can kind of just hit the ground running for once we get back in the cars here in about a couple weeks times.
Gotcha. And I'm happy. I'm interested to get your take on that because you made the comment about Max Garcia. Yes, reigning USF 2000 champion, taking the step up. Yourself, you got Miles Rowe coming back. Supposedly, there's a fourth car that's going to be run that there's not a driver assigned to it yet. Is that since we're on that topic, any news there? Anybody close to signing that you're aware of right now? Or are they still looking at all their options?
I know who the fourth driver is. We do have a fourth driver that is signed, but I'm going to go ahead and keep that information closed for now. I'll let them announce it when they get the chance to and when they want to. But yes, I know the fourth driver who's going to be, and he's a good one. I'll tell you that.
So is that announcement coming soon?
That I don't know on. No, I do not know when the timing of that announcement will be. But I don't know if they're going to announce it before the Chris Griffiths test, or if it's after the Chris Griffiths test, or it's even during the Chris Griffiths test. But I do know we do got a fourth driver that's going to be on board. That's going to be a really comfortable, really close driver to all of us.
Well, you heard it here first, seventh gear over at fans. I asked the question, but I respect the inability of Jordan to answer that question and leave it to the team to break that news. But hopefully, at least we've got our eyes open, looking for that news. Now, as you went through the season, man, you saw some crazy stuff. I mean, I remember seeing some off track stuff like Laguna, like Mid Ohio. I mean, the Mid Ohio race weekend, you were there when that massive crash went down
Yep.
on that front straightaway that damn near took out the start finish tower. What
Yeah.
did you see when you came up on that? Because it had just happened.
So quite honestly, I did not see anything that happened because, as normal race car drivers are, when you're chasing through the field, your eyes are forward and they're never looking back. So that wreck actually happened behind me. So luckily
Oh,
enough, I didn't get
gotcha.
to see it. But yes, I saw the yellow come out, and then shortly after that, the red flag came out, and I knew once the red flag came out, this was obviously something big, something serious, and I had radioed in asking if everyone was okay, and they said yes. And we were probably in the cars for at least about 5-10 minutes before they said, "All right, drivers can get out of their cars," and all that stuff. And when we heard that, it was going to be obviously extensive guardrail repair, just lots of other repair that was going to happen. So that's why they red flagged the race and let us get out of the cars. And the first thing I did was once I got out of the car, I look at the TV monitor and I could see Sebastian Murray's car basically going end over end with his like himself going backwards. And I was like, oh, I figured it was big. I didn't think it was that big. So
that
yeah,
was
that was
that
pretty
was massive.
interesting to see.
Holy. Shitballs, kids. That was yeah, I saw that and I was like, "Oh my god." Now, we talked a little bit about, feeling like there's still some stuff left on the table that you maybe could have achieved from the season. But you've got the benchmark, but you've also gotten pretty damn good on the ovals. Where did that
Mhm.
come from? Having the the road racing background? Because I can tell you from when I did my IndyCar rookie test or my Indy Lights rookie test, and it was at Chicagoland Speedway. Being on an
Good
oval
track.
was the most foreign thing completely to me. It's like I had to like literally put my left foot on top of my right foot to keep it flat through the corners because it was definitely not a comfortable thing initially. How did you get as comfortable with it as you are?
So I like to stud this to mainly me going to a lot of races and being a sponge at being a fan, I guess you could say. And that stems from me going to a ton of NASCAR races as a kid, or even going to all the IndyCar races when they come here to Chicagoland Speedway. And just know that, throughout the whole IRL days as well, the early 2000s, most of the time they were flat and it's pack racing. And that's something that I've wanted to always try to do. I mean, yes, I know IndyCar drivers nowadays are saying that that's scary type of racing and, it's dangerous and it can kill somebody, which we have seen it happen before. But that's still some type of racing that I want to be able to experience and want to try to do because I feel like that's racing that's kind of right up my alley in my wheelhouse. And going through all the NASCAR races, I've seen what they've done with stock cars, changing lanes, and trying to run the high line to gain momentum off of corners and all that. And then when you look at some of the times where now when they were running the 550 package, they were starting to be susceptible to a lot of dirty air and having to change up lines. Well, that's the same way kind of in the open wheel cars. When you get to the next car, you get the downforce taken away off your front wings and you can't run the exact same line because then you get aero wash. So having to change different lanes and having to change the lines kind of helped me understand, like, if someone's going to go to the bottom, all right, I know I need to go to the top. If someone's going to go to the top, all right, I got to try to run the bottom, basically drive where they're not. And just watching all these races from the IRL days, NASCAR days, and even here at Chicagoland and first being there in person gave me the confidence and gave me the understanding of how to go oval racing. And with also doing a bunch of NASCAR games, sim stuff, driving on, iRacing a lot too, and doing a bunch of different scenarios. Yeah, you learn just by example, and then you just apply the skills that you learn there and what you've seen, and just do it in real life. Because obviously, if the pros are doing it, it must be true. So you learn from what you see, and then you just go put it into action, and you go by experience from there. So that's kind of what got me susceptible to oval racing. And plus, I was always been an oval racing fan my entire life growing up as a kid and everything, and always wanted to try to do it as well too. So when you go to open wheel racing and you go on ovals, I just kind of had a natural knack to it and natural niche of knowing what to have happen. So yeah, it just comes out of me when I go on oval racing. It's just it's a natural talent that I could see in myself.
Damn, I should have talked with you much earlier on in my career. I could have used some of that advice. Do you have any like driver mentors or anybody that you kind of chat with that maybe gave you some tips or some things to help get you more comfortable on the ovals to not just get comfortable but to be fast comfortable? And I know fast comfortable on
um
an oval is kind of an oxymoron, but
Yeah, not really like on an oval. It's all kind of been self-taught. Now, over the years, I've been able to have a couple of mentors that have kind of given me some tips and tricks here and there. Like, obviously, two best of the oval racing mentors I probably could have asked for growing up. And wasn't able to lean on them a lot, but I was able to lean on them a little bit for some information here and there. Two legends of Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson. I've been able to talk with Jimmy a couple times. Jeff Gordon a lot have I've been able to talk with too. He actually introduced me one day to William Byron when he was coming up through the ranks and was taking over the 24C for the first time back in 2018. And then even I got introduced to Chase Elliott a couple of times too. Had to talk with them. So these are all oval racing ringers too. When you talk about from NASCAR side. Now, as far as the open wheel side too, I've been able to have conversations with Elio Castroneves, Graham Rahal, and then over the past couple of years been associated with Connor Daly as well too. So when you put all those guys together, all those guys have won big races on ovals, and especially Connor Daly as of late, he's been a very key proponent and signature of going to the high side early on in the race and knowing where the grip level is early on. So I'd say when it comes to oval racing, I'm in pretty good company when I've talked to mentor wise.
No kidding. I mean, yeah, we were just interviewing Connor's dad, Derek, on the show a couple weeks ago, and you're right. Connor's one of those that is just so much fun to watch. And of course, you got Elio. You said, I mean, what better person to even get just one answer from? You know, as a four-time Indy 500 winner. Plus, Graham, I know you've got a close relationship with him, having driven with or for him in the Radical Cup stuff. And it's funny that you bring up Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson because back in the day when they were first learning how to road race, they came through the racing school that I was teaching at. So I actually had the opportunity to work with those guys and teach them a couple of road racing skills. So that's my claim to fame on those guys. But at any rate, thinking about the oval still, I mean, because I'm a huge oval fan and have been
Mhm.
since I was a kid. I grew up just outside of the Milwaukee Mile, and we'll talk more about that here in a second. But does it kind of bum you out that the Indy Next Series isn't running the Freedom 100 on the oval at the Speedway and just the road course?
Absolutely. That's one of the things I wish, I'd say Indy Next and IndyCar as a whole would go back to, is doing more ovals, especially more mile and a half ovals. Like, I like to see them go back to Texas. I like to see them go back to Chicagoland. I like to see them, just go back to even Kentucky, let's just say. Some of the big mile and a half ovals, which, put IndyCar on the map for me as a kid, which was back in the IRL days. I'd love to see that. The closest race, the closest finishes in IndyCar history have come at Chicagoland. You look at the last Texas race back in 2023 with this chassis. It was probably one of the best races of the whole year. There were passes left and right. It was basically flat out pack racing. Kentucky has also hold us to good races too, and especially the one when Ned Carpenter won. I think it was back in 2010, or when it was a very close finish as well too. So I'd love to see some of the high speed oval races, and especially like for us with Indy Next. Yeah, the Freedom 100 absolutely needs to be on the calendar for us, especially if we're going to be racing in Indianapolis 500 one of these days. I mean, yeah, the rookie test is great, but the first time we're going to be on track in traffic is basically at speeds of 220 miles an hour. You know, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing or anything like that, but it'd be nice to be on the speedway going around 190, 100, 200 miles an hour in racing conditions. And plus, the Indy Next race there at the speedway put on some of the best racing in the world. So I think that's something we'd see. And plus, I'd like to just go to bigger mile and a half races and be able to just race the Indy Next cars at like Chicagoland or Texas or even like a Kentucky. And I mean, Nashville is probably one of the best races on the calendar and the most exciting race on the year because of how wide open and high speed it is and how much passing opportunity it is. You go to these mile and a half races or even the big ovals, and it's the best racing that you see on the Indy Next calendar. So I think if you want to bring eyes to the sport, and I think if you want to bring eyes to IndyCar and excitement to it, put us on ovals.
Yeah. Yeah, that was also part of the conversation I was having with Derek Daly is we can't forget about that and as much of the part of the IndyCar heritage as ovals are, plus just the great racing. I mean, you talking about the Freedom 100. I mean, Jesus, those have been some of the greatest finishes as well. I mean, it wasn't all that long ago that they were four wide at the checkered. So, and I remember spotting for a couple of the Freedom 100s there. So I would love to see that back, especially, for guys in like Indy Next to be able to help justify sponsorships, the eyeballs from the fans and the TV to help get you guys the sponsorship rather than relying on a lot of these drivers that come with family money, whether it's their family business or just personal fortune. It would be a lot easier sell. Not that it's an easy sell by any stretch, but to help on the marketing side of things for you guys to have that extra visibility of a marquee event like the Freedom 100. I know I miss it. Um, but back to the ovals, man, because I just for those of you seventh gear over Rev fans that did not watch this race, and Jordan and I talked about this a little bit before we got on air, but the
Mhm.
Milwaukee Indy Next race, which was the next to last race of the season this year, this dude debuted a new livery and a new sponsor, which we'll get to here in a couple minutes. But he had a number of saves. It was a little Christian Rasmussen esque from the IndyCar race the next day because this guy got dead sideways more than one time. And I remember watching the race because Milwaukee's kind of home track for me growing up. And I was like, how did this dude not crash? So, Jordan, take us through what caused those, let's just say, moments
Mhm.
for you in that race. And how was the car? I mean, was there anything with the car setup that made it a little bit looser, or did it get looser as the race went on? But what kind of led into those things? Because it wasn't just once; it was practically a handful of times, and you had more than a handful of steering in there.
Yeah. So the first one that happened, which I believe was on lap three, Just came stemmed, I think, from a little bit lower tire pressures. I think me and my engineer, we decided to start a little bit lower, knowing that the race was going to be long and the pressures were going to ramp up pretty quickly. And given the tire degradation, our setup was set up more for the longer run. So we started off with a little bit lesser tire pressure, and I was trying to make a move on my teammate Jack Miller at the time, and he took the proper line and was kind of coming down as you would in the corner. You would dime in the corner a little bit, so I was kind of diming in it as well, and I think I just got all four of my tires on the black, which if you do that, there's pretty much no grip down there. There's a little bit of grip, but not a lot. And when I did it, I think I just grabbed a little bit of too much handful of throttle on the exit, and it just spun up the rear wheels. And around she came the first time, was able to save it that time and keep it going. And then the second time was later in the race. I was trying to chase down both James Rowe and Michael D'Orlando as we got towards the end. Both of them were struggling, and both of them started taking my lines away. So I kind of had to run higher and higher up the racetrack to try to find out where the grip was so I could try to get a run around them to keep the momentum going. And when I got into three and turn one and two, the one time it was almost similar to what Jack Miller did in front of me when he spun out and hit the wall, was just get up kind of in the dust and the marbles, and then was basically having to save it. And when she came around, she was coming around quick. And I kid you not, I was probably minus 245 degrees of steering angle, locked basically on the lock stops, trying to save this thing. And I didn't think she was going to grip. And then she finally gripped up and I kept it going. So, it was kind of a hope and a prayer to kind of keep it off the wall and keep it going. But I was just fortunate enough not to run into anybody else as I was coming down a hill. But yeah, had to make two big saves to keep the car going and still finish the race in 13th, I think it was. Which that's one of those races I mentioned earlier when you wanted to have back, because I think we had a seventh or eighth place car, but it's better
Yep.
to come home in 13th than on the tow hook, I guess, in the wall.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely right. That was definitely, I mean, I would love to see the data trace from those couple spins. I'm sure it was probably pretty amusing. You guys probably had a pretty good laugh at that. Now, you just recently, I think within the last week, it came out on the Abel Motorsports website and the Indy Next website that you have re-signed with Abel for 2026, as we mentioned earlier, and with your sponsor that you debuted at Milwaukee. But before we talk about that, talk a little bit about it, kind of in some of that news cycle, shall we say. You were talking about how you identified some things on your own throughout the course of the season that you can kind of hone in on and work on this off season. You want to kind of expand on that a little bit and let the seventh gear over viewers kind of know what you're talking about when you say those kinds of things?
Yeah, so obviously it's just kind of getting more dialed in and more in tune with the car. I think as we come out through the course of the year, the Indy Next car compared to like a USF Pro 2000 car is a very, very big step. And there's a lot more buttons on the steering wheel, a lot more levers that we're having to play with, a lot more adjustables that we have to our arsenal inside the cockpit. So just being able to adapt and do those adjustments on the fly was one of the biggest things, and then being able to relay that information to my engineers and being able to talk with them over data points and all that is one of the key things that I feel like I need to kind of tone in a little bit more, be a little bit more cognizant of as we get into the season. But I think also too is to find out where the pace is. The biggest thing that I kind of lacked was finding out the true raw pace of where the tire is, and also figuring out where that extract that qualifying pace that I'm looking for. Those extra half second to 6/10 of a second when you throw on the new tires. Because the biggest thing with me is I'm all about consistency, and no, have 9 times out of 10, my pace that I'm running is generally going to be my race pace. You see guys that will throw, a burner down, let's say it's a half second faster, and then they get into the race pace and then they're dropping, the car starts to kind of fall away from them. The tire degradation starts to kick in. Whereas for me, yeah, the tire degradation kicks in, but it's by tenths. I don't fall off as much where I'm down to my race pace. So once I kind of stick to my race pace and that's where I'm at, like my qualifying pace is basically my race pace. Once you get to that race pace, I'm basically locked in there, and that's where I'm going to be running the whole race from. So it's trying to extract that extra couple tenths to where my qualifying pace is up at the sharp end of the field, and then that's where my race pace is going to be as well too.
Well, yeah, I think that makes good sense that one of the key areas for you would be to work on that qualifying pace, because as you well know, whether it's a 16 car next field or a 20, 22, 24 car next field, if you're starting further to the front, you're less susceptible to getting into the chaos, especially on the ovals that can happen. You know, whether it's
Yeah.
somebody touching wheels or a half spin, or somebody being a little too overly optimistic on lap one of the race, even on the road course. But all right, so we got to talk about this new livery and this new gig that you debuted at Milwaukee. But before we do, let's just throw a quick shout out here as we get into the second half of our show. If you like Seventh Gear Over It fans, what you're hearing us do here on the show, we've had some great guests on recently, with Derek Daly being one of them, Lonnie Unser, Jack Baldwin of Trans Am fame. Make sure you like the show. Hit that subscribe button. Share us with your friends. We're now heard in 114 countries, and we're just right on the precipice of 10,000 downloads on all time now, with the advent of our push here to the YouTube channel. And as well, we'd like to thank our partners at Kraus Meats, the finest purveyors of quality artisan handcrafted meats and sausages throughout all of North America. It's always top quality since 1923, especially now that the summer grilling season is all but over. It's time to think about holiday gift giving. So make sure you check out krausmeats.com for their even lower pricing and nationwide shipping. And then also our great friends and partners over at Dick Carriers and respectyourpackage.com, makers of those fantastic breathable high-end men's underwear with the complete with ball bustier technology, no less. And they are respectfully scandalous yet unapologetic. And if you go to their website to place your order and you put in the promo code respect7, that's the number 7, you will get 20% off of your entire order. So be sure to go ahead and support those two companies that help us out. It certainly works for all of us, and they would all appreciate that. But with all that said, I was really grooving, Jordan, on that great new livery that you debuted at Milwaukee. That kind
Mhm.
of blue and black with the grip, and I know that's an important deal to you, and I'm sure that had a big factor into you being able to announce a full season back at Abel next year. So, talk about what grip is for those that don't know, how that whole deal came about, and what that all means moving forward.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can't thank enough to both friends of mine now, true friends of mine. I can even be safe to say they call me even brothers. I would say Alex and Matt Park, who started off with the grip business that they came up with. They brought on one of the liaisons, a guy by the name of Jason Lee, who used to work at Salesforce and then also worked in this company called Option Swing. He came on board. We took him out to his first race actually over in Iowa when we had that race. And then he also came out to Laguna Seca, and we were able to bring him once again to Nashville towards the end of the season. But it was his idea to come up with the grip livery with this turquoise or teal color car, which looks like turquoise green in the dark. And then it comes to this shiny, bright blue that catches your eye in the sunlight, mixed with this black color. And it has been absolutely phenomenal to be able to drive with, be able to look at. And the whole reason behind that livery was put like 4 or 5 other cars that were also red and white schemes as well. So we're like, all right, we need something that's going to stand out, that's going to catch people's eye, that's going to pop, and people go like, wow, that's a cool car. And I think they knocked it out of the park when it came to this livery and unveiling in Milwaukee in this car color, because it caught Jack Harvey's eye, it caught Kevin Lee's eye, and it caught everybody else's eye, because I had so many people come up to me saying, this car looks absolutely cool. It looks so sick. And it's been fun to be able to rock and drive on the racetrack every now and then. But Grip has been also a really good supporter of us, and yeah, you're right, they have been a huge part of us being able to sign on this early for 2026, helping us bring other partners on board. And really been a social media company that's kind of helped me out. Started back in 2024 with the Radical Days, and then this year kind of helping bring the branch the social media following that has been on my accounts as of late. All the different posts that we've been seeing have been helped out through Grip. But at the same time, they've also extended out to build a community partnership. We have now Grip has now also launched out its own community on Discord and iRacing, to where now we are basically hosting on our own community races, that are now also going to be live streamed through our Discord channel. And we're also giving away prizes too, like $100 to the winner, $20 to second, $5 to third place, for all these sim racers to come on in, enjoy the community, talk with one another, just create a community about it. And then it's also back in me, it's also back in Indy Next. And it's just a great way for people to kind of get to know each other, get better. And then also through all this, we're reaching out to different connections and partnerships, to bring them out to the racetrack to understand what motorsports industry is all about, what the ROI, the business to business deals you can receive from being at the racetrack. So Grip has done a tremendous amount of work for me so far, and it's also something that we're going to be happy to also announce and debut here in the next coming months, I would say, as we get closer and closer to the start of the season. But it doesn't just stop with me. We're looking to also help out other teams, other drivers as well too, and even help the series of Indy Next as well. One of our goals is to eventually find a sponsor that we could bring on board to not only support myself, other drivers, but also support the series to actually hopefully have a title sponsor for one of these Indy Next races to bring, the Indy Next races more to the IndyCar schedule and also more to a professional ladder series than what it is right now.
Gotcha. Well, and it's, we kind of alluded to at the beginning of the show, the depth of talent, much like the IndyCar series, is only getting deeper and deeper. I mean, you see more of these guys, like Dennis Hauger kind of came out of nowhere and did really well for
Mhm.
Andretti. You see more and more of these guys, Max Garcia, your new teammate, is another one of these guys that, the depth of talent and the level of talent is getting bigger and bigger and I hope it continues because it's only good for the IndyCar series. Obviously, Indy Next can always benefit from having a greater presence if they can get to the point of getting enough attention, enough car count, that sort of thing. I mean, I remember back in the day when car counts were like, if you got 12 to 14 cars for an Indy Next race, it was a big field, and it was like, is the series going to make it? And now, obviously, you've got the new car, relatively new car. You've got great talent. They're in fantastic venues. I still think if we could add the Freedom 100 back on the oval at Indy, that would be a good thing. But it's great to hear that there's companies like Grip that are investing in you to help your career and hoping to, help the series itself continue to progress. So when we talk about how that was a key point, it sounds to me from what you said that, that really opened the door for other companies that you may have already been talking to kind of jump on board. Has that been sort of like oh yeah, you've got them? Okay, we're in. Has it been sort of like that with some of your other associate partners?
It's definitely been similar to that. Yes, it's been connection based. Obviously, Jason himself is a very successful guy as well too, with all of his businesses that he's starting up and all the work that he's been in and companies, different companies he's worked with. Once he's kind of come on board, he's seen how the ecosystem and how the space has worked in through us, and how we presented it to. He's just gone ahead, turn around, and gone to these other companies and just explain it the exact same way as we have, and they are definitely expressing some interest and definitely starting to see why he's gotten involved in it and what he sees and why he sees this as a great ecosystem and a system of businesses to come on in and way to market themselves. You look at it from from an interesting standpoint. You look at the TV ratings. We're upwards into almost the 100, I would say almost close to 100,000 that are watching our any next races. And around 79,000, I'd say on average, are watching our races. That's 79,000 more people that you probably won't even get eyes on your company or brand that you wouldn't have if you weren't a part of the Indy Next series. And it's for a fraction of the price of what the IndyCar series you're paying for. So from that kind of a deal, when you look at it from what IndyCar is also giving, their upwards in probably like the million range in terms of viewership, and then us over in the hundred thousands of range, and we start bringing in more races like the Freedom 100, let's just say, and also now since Indy Next has also fallen underneath the Penske banner and IndyCar banner, our races are starting to be treated more like the NTT IndyCar Series races. We're starting to get the exact same amount of officiating. We're starting to get the exact same amount of endorsements. We now have the Fox Sports TV deals that are coming through. So when you start to see that and combine it all together and looking at the revenue share and also looking at the numbers together and the ROI that you're getting back from it, it's kind of a no-brainer to why wouldn't you want to get involved in any of the Indy Next races? Because you're looking at how many eyeballs are going to be on you and how many people are going to be seeing your companies. And when you get the ad track experience as well, too, of an IndyCar series race and an Indy Next series race that's there right in front of you, that's happening on the exact same day, it's just a no brainer to kind of get involved and be able to see what the ecosystem and motorsports side is it's like. And it doesn't just stem from us. It's also a way for other businesses to get in touch with other companies that are there at the track too. Because after all, the races are the entertainment standpoint. The business side of it all is the network database that we basically bring you guys all to the races. You get in touch with other companies. Next thing you know, you're talking on Monday and you're making deals on Tuesday.
Yeah, still very much a B2B kind of deal, even in this day and age with AI and all kinds of social media presence and that sort of thing. So, um, when it comes to the grip involvement in your program specifically, are we going to see the same livery on the car for 2026? You think, or are they going to switch it up a little bit?
You're definitely going to see probably the same livery on the car for next year. So the guys that are making like you're making stickers of it and you're making T-shirts of it. Yep, you're going to have the exact same updated livery. We could potentially see some sponsorship placement that are different, or we can also see some different livery change ups. You know, the whole part about the grip community that we have too is we potentially could be putting on some contest ideas for potentially new livery changes. So that's the whole purpose and the whole aspect of the community idea that Grip has put together is we could probably be the car on the most interactive car on the grid that's also changing up the scheme throughout the course of the year. So 2026 is going to be busy for us, but also I think it's going to be a lot of fun for us as well too.
Yeah, I think. I mean, man, it's the arrow is definitely pointing up for you. I'm glad that you were able to secure that deal in your place and able for next year. So, by all means, on behalf of all of us here at Seventh Gear Over, congrats on that new sponsorship gig. So, we talk all the time about, yeah, racing's expensive. Whether you're going go-karting or you're running Radical Cup or Indy Next or IndyCar, NASCAR, whatever. What does a typical Indy Next budget look like these days
I mean,
for a
you're
full
looking anywhere,
season with?
yeah, you're looking anywhere between, let's say, a million at least, upwards to around 1.5, 1.7. So I mean, it's getting upwards closer to the 2 million range, and you include crash damage and all that too, that kind of comes with it as well too, then yeah, you're kind of budgeting for almost around 2 million. So for someone to just have 2 million to kind of could just pocket over out of pocket is it's very difficult and very challenging. And when you get to this level, the competition and the racing gets tighter, and you expect a little bit more respectful level of racing, given that you're driving $100,000 race cars around a high speed oval or road course that up speeds upwards to around 170 miles an hour, 180 even plus. You expect the level of respect to be there, especially when we're all fighting for somewhat the same thing. And we're all going to race hard, but there comes a time where people are going to be driving in over their heads, or people are going to be driving respectfully and giving each other room and properly racing right. And you kind of expect that when you get to this level, when we're dealing with bunch of dollars of upwards towards like the 2 million range. So yeah, it does get very difficult, and that's why us drivers rely so much on the sponsors to be able to make these deals happen, make the season happen. Because without the sponsors, none of this is possible. I hear drivers all the time, like a Kyle Kirkwood or even like a Lockie Hughes, for example, say that without the USF Pro Championship scholarships, or without the scholarships or winning races or moving up to the next level, they would not be racing today. And some of us are fortunate enough to have some sponsor backing to be able to make us do it. I mean, if it wasn't for Grip or these sponsors, I probably would not be in a seat this year in Indy Next. You have some guys who obviously come from lots of backing and lots of money that can go spend $2 million here and there to go race in a series, and they have pockets of like $100+ million or $200+ million. But there's some drivers that just don't come from that much money, and they have to rely on race wins. They have to rely on performance, and working the markets, working the networks, going to those important meetings and closing those deals in order to get the checks signed over to us to be able to go cash it into our race teams and team owners and say, I got the money, I'm going to go race this year.
Right, right, exactly. So, knowing that, and you obviously your spot for Abel and Indy next year is secure, as is James's and Max's. When we look at that, and you talked about respectful driving and a tight field and that sort of thing, we talked earlier in the show about Andretti Global having a kind of a powerhouse team. We know that Ganassi is going to expand their Indy Next program. HMD is probably going to shrink a little bit because I think maybe even they realize that running 8 cars is effing stupid. And then you've got you guys at Able that are seemingly kind of in that growth mode. And I love the fact that there's some cohesion there. I mean, I know, yes, Max is new and probably your fourth driver is new, but you got Miles returning, you're returning, you kind of know the team. You're back with a previous engineer that you guys know each other as well. Realistically, Jordan, where do you see Abel in terms of the sort of the hierarchy and pecking order competing against the Andretti Globals and the Ganassis and the HMDs for next season?
Well, right now, I would say, judging by the drivers that have signed on and that are looking towards, you got three drivers that are at Andretti. And right now, I'd probably say the most lethal one that is in competition is going to be Lockie Hughes. Max Taylor has definitely got a lot of pedigree and a lot of, credentials that come with him. Obviously, with the USF Juniors title that he won, I believe it was last year. And then obviously doing a couple Indy Next races this year. this will be basically his first full season, so he'll have a little bit of learning to do. But but I do expect him to kind of be up towards the front, maybe more of a up towards the front, maybe more of a mid packer kind of guy. So definitely could see Max Taylor being a little bit of a threat as well. Nikita Johnson's another one that I can see being a very lethal threat as well too. He's obviously did some Indy Next races and then has gone over to race in FIA F3 this past year as well too. So he's got some experience overseas there. But I would expect Abel to be very close, if not right there at the top. I think you could probably see this year be an Andretti versus Abel battle. HMD obviously had Kyle Collette, and I think they potentially could be bringing Josh Pearson back, which would be another lethal candidate to the season. But as right now, I haven't heard many other drivers that have been signed, and they also got that technical alliance that's going on with Cusick Motorsports now too. So they'll have four other drivers to their arsenal. Obviously, you have the Cape Andretti alliance that's going on with Andretti Global there too. So you look at it, Andretti's got 6 cars, HMD's got 8 cars technically. S at Abel, we have 4, but we're going to have 4 cars that are going to be very quick and very fast up towards the front of the field each and every race. So I think you could see it probably be more of an Andretti versus Abel battle this year.
I got you. And do you think that, you said earlier that Max is bringing a little bit of a technical support alliance from Penske with him. From what you know about that right now, do you think that could be, sort of like the unfair advantage, sort of like that secret sauce that maybe could help get you that next big jump, if there is a big jump to be had?
I think it helps a little bit. I don't know if it brings too much help in the terms of for performance wise. I think it definitely could help in terms of like the engineering side and what they know over on the IndyCar side that it could bring over to the Indy Next side. And obviously, we had that connection with Miles and Force Indy with Rod Reed and the Drive for Diversity program that Force Indy is able to offer too, and the connection that Miles has with Roger Penske himself. So I'm not saying like I don't think the Penske Alliance could definitely help us out. I think it definitely will. But I don't know if it's going to help in terms of like the affiliation. Like, I don't think you're going to see the huge performance jump that you would expect. Because obviously, as we're talking Indy Next, it's a spec series at the end of the day. We're all running the exact same parts, we're running the exact same adjustments. The biggest thing that us as Able Motorsports we have to work up to is, we've only been in this series since 2021, 2022, I believe, when Jacob Abel came into the series. Obviously, John Bruner and some of the guys and engineers have been around since the Bellardi days, so they've been around a lot longer. But you're looking at Andretti and how long they've been around. They've been around since the IL-15 chassis has come out. So they've been around for almost now 10 years in the Indy Next series. And when you're talking with a team like Bellardi to now Abel Motorsports being around, yeah, we've been around probably, I would say, a good 7 or 8 years, but there's still a couple years of catch up that we still have to play against Andretti too. So I think there's definitely going to be some growth with the Penske alliance that we have going in here with Max and Miles obviously helping us out. But I think you can still see a little bit of performance gain out of us, and I think it's going to pay off along in the long run.
Well, and I think, as we saw on the IndyCar side, look at the Penske alliance that they had with Foyt, with Santino and Malukas. They certainly saw an uptick in performance. Now, how much of that was directly related to the Penske involvement, it's kind of hard to say, but I would imagine it definitely had something to do with it. So, who knows? Who knows? I'm hoping like you that there's definitely some benefit there, and it winds up being an Andretti Able 2026 shootout. So when you look, let's just play a little forward thinking game here. So you're locked
Mhm.
in for 2026. Obviously, you've got your next test coming up
Mhm.
here at Indy. Let's say you're able to finish top 5 in the championship next year.
Yep.
What then? Where are you looking past that? What, like, the what's next for Jordan Missig? What is next for Jordan Missig?
Yeah, obviously, that obviously comes into the forefront. And once you get to the Indy Next level, I mean, how can you not think about, IndyCar being the next step? That's the term is you're one step away once you get to the next level. So, top 5 in the series is obviously good, but this is the year where I do want to make that big step. I want to have that breakout season. I do want to be able to make that big jump and tell teams, hey, let's finish on podiums a couple of times. Let's be in the contention for a championship. Let's get some wins and let's be show teams that we're ready for IndyCar. I want to be able to make that transition and make that jump to eventually, by next year, I'm talking to teams and trying to find a seat to get into the NTT IndyCar series. That's obviously the goal. That's obviously where I want to be and where I want to stem with. I think that goal is achievable. It's just going to come down to the performance of what we can do on the racetrack. And I think this coming year is going to be a very pivotal year for me and something that I'm going to put my head down, lock in on, and see something that we're going to try to go to the front. We're going to win races this year. That's one thing I want to try to be able to achieve is win races and be upfront and be contending for podiums, be contending for wins, and be contending for a championship. Now, obviously, you always have to have a backup plan just in case things don't work out. So, I'm always keeping options available to, do sports car deals, whether it's an LMP2 or GTP ride, or even look down the NASCAR route and go stock car racing and maybe even race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. At the end of the day, my story is a little bit different, given that I'm a little bit on the older spectrum when it comes to racing. Me being right now currently 27, want to enter the IndyCar series at, let's say, 29 years old or 30 years old. It's
Shh,
not
don't tell
too
people
too
that.
late. Yeah, it's not too late, I will say. Well, look at Robert Wickens. Robert Wickens came in as a rookie at the age of 33, and everyone loved him. So, I mean, it's not like anything different in that sense. And you can look on the NASCAR side. Josh Berry entered the NASCAR Cup Series at the age of 34 as a rookie. So, age is just a number to some people, and I want people to know that it's not just you have to be young within the ages of 21 to 25 in order to be a rookie in the NTT IndyCar series. You can be a little bit older and have the achievements. Obviously, Scott McLaughlin, I look at him as a guy who's been very achievable over at the V8 supercar level before he transitioned over to IndyCar, but he was in his late 20s, almost early 30s when he came over and had absolutely zero open wheel experience. So there's nothing to say that you could be an old race car driver and still have the young talent of a young whippersnapper or young kid to be able to wheel an IndyCar around and be able to win races. I mean, at the end of the day, these IndyCar team owners are not looking at who's the youngest competitor out there. They're who's the fastest and who's the most, persistent, consistent, and race winning racecraft competitor out there. They're looking for race winners. They're not looking for slouches that are going to be running in the back.
Right. That's exactly right. But so now on the flip side, and I've had this conversation with a number of my driver buddies as well, and I'll pose it to you too because I'm sure it's crossed your mind or you've had conversations about it. So you strive so hard to go up the ladder, do well, and continue to improve in a series, whether it's you're moving from USF 2000 to Indy Next, whatever it happens to be. But
Mhm.
as you well know, whether it's the Radical Cup Series, Indy Next, there can only be one or two guys. You get the
Mhm.
scholarship for winning the series, like Hauger did. And then you got, guys like Kaio being looked at by Foyt and testing with them. But beyond that, there's no promises of anything else going on. So now you're entering year two full time with Abel, and let's on the broader spectrum, let's say Indy Next. So let's say for whatever reason it doesn't happen. You could run into a string of bad luck like Penske did on the IndyCar side this year, and you wind up
Mhm.
finishing fifth or sixth in the championship again. How long do you stay in that series before either people start to say, "Yeah, he probably just doesn't quite have it," or the funding changes and you got to look at something else? How long do you stay in a given series before you realize I kind of missed my window?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of stems down to the performance level. I think, you look at drivers, it's like asking the same question: how long do you stay racing until you feel like it's time to hang the helmet up and retire? You look at some of these guys that want to go out on a high note that've been in the series for quite some time, or you look at a guy like, let's just say, Scott Dixon, who's going to run, until he may not win a race anymore. So, I think it just comes down to the performance level. And everyone asked, Will Power this year, is this your last year, or are you going to be racing with Penske again this year, or what's next for you? Some people, raise the question that Will Power might retire at the end of this year. And he wasn't winning races, but he won the race at Portland towards the end of the year, and oddly enough, he had already made up his mind of where he was going to be the next year. So I think him ultimately deciding on where he was going to go next year took that pressure off of him and then allowed him to actually go win a race in that season. But everyone was just questioning because his performance wasn't there. The Penske's obviously were struggling. He didn't win a race, and everyone was just questioning if he was going to actually be around for next year. But I think he had that kind of figured out all along because he knew he still had the talent. He knew he still had the consistency. He knew he still had the performance level in him. And if you still got the performance level going, you still love what you're doing, why would you want to get out of the seat and quit? So, in terms of me, I think my performance level and the consistency is going to really tell what's going to happen. Yeah, obviously budget has a lot to do with it. You can only go until you run out of money, let's just say. But if the money's there, I think you stay there until someone says, "Hey, I think we got to look for somebody else who's better than you," or the performance just isn't going to be there for you, and you feel like, "I think I need a little bit of change of scenery." So, yeah, that's why we say this year for me is a true pivotal year, given that it's going to be my second year and we're coming off a pretty decent first season, we like to see that huge jump in progression. Now, are we expecting, podiums and wins right off the bat? It would be nice. I would say that's something that I'm going to be look forward to, and that's going to be my goal. But if it doesn't come to it, then we have to set our expectations a little bit more realistic, and then we have to kind of see what the next plan is going to be there. Whether we do a third year of Indy next, or we maybe go to down the sports car route and find a paying job there, or do we go the NASCAR route and get sponsorship that way? Obviously, it's a lot easier to get sponsorship on the NASCAR side, and obviously, when you're racing sports cars, you know, there's a lot more paying opportunities and a lot more open seats, and there's a lot more drivers that are getting paid and making money over there too. So you kind of have to look at the balance of here. It's what's going to be the best scenario for me. And I've always been the stem of I want to race against the best and be the best, and that's why we chose the open wheel IndyCar series ladder to go after.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. So obviously, a driver's season is never over, even when the on track part of the year is over. So we finished up like right at the end of August into September. You've been lucky enough to be able to secure your deal and announce it. But as we all know, as drivers, the off season really isn't an off season. There's always more to do. So what does your off season look like outside of the Chris Griffiths test that's coming up on the 27th?
Well, besides the general aspect of every other driver will tell you, it's always workouts, go to the gym, staying in shape, being conditioned, and also being on the simulators, trying to do, everything you can to, give the best possible performance that you can in the downtime. But for me this year, it's also been closing deals. It's been also trying to be in those meetings that need to be happening, sourcing out our sponsorship opportunities, companies, trying to do a little bit more fan engagement here and there, trying to be more in the limelight, trying to build up the popularity of myself as a person, as an ambassador, to get more companies on board. Because, at the end of the day, if you're able to bring the money into come race, you're going to keep your chances alive and keep your butt in a seat if you're able to bring those opportunities. So it's going out to these different events. It's going out, shaking hands, kissing babies, basically trying to do whatever we can to bring in the limelight, the fan engagement, and the notoriety to myself as an athlete, as a driver, as an ambassador, as a brand. I would say to bring into some of those companies to now be that moving billboard that's on the racetrack, to show the message of on TV of why are we going to be becoming the most popular driver, or why are we so loved around the paddock, and why do people need to know who my name is, so when I do get to the NTT IndyCar series or go on the NASCAR route, people are going to know who I am, and people are going to, how can you not cheer for me when I'm on the racetrack? So that's a lot of the tasking that's going on during the off season. Obviously, there's going to be some downtime where we're going to go on trips, vacation, relax a little bit, maybe play some golf here and there, just like every other driver does. But I think for the most part, the very important opportunities are trying to go to those important meetings, being in those calls, getting those deals done, and being the driver that's most liked on the racetrack, and also has the fan base that's behind you. Because at the end of the day, everyone loves the most popular driver, and that's what we're trying to go for.
Good deal, man. I love that. All right. So, as we get ready to throw the checkered flag on this week's episode, I just got a couple more things here for you, Jordan. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention this because I know your mom and dad would kill me if I didn't bring this up either. But you're still pulling and kind of helping out, giving awareness to the whole racing for mental health aspect and that initiative that they've done so much work on. And I know you just did an event, at the Audubon Country Club where we both have strong ties. You want to talk a little bit about how that's been a part of your racing program here the last year and moving forward?
Yeah, and this has also been another key point to what has been also bringing in the fan engagement and why people have liked what we've been able to do. Has been through the mental health standpoint. Everyone that I've known, I've talked about the mental health aspect of what we've been doing and how we're using my racing platform to kind of help promote it. And everybody that I've handed a pamphlet out to or I've taught them about the racing mental health, charity foundation has absolutely loved it. They've been really behind it. They like the idea. They've been supportive of it, and it's an awareness campaign to basically and try to end the stigma of mental health that's been going around. Obviously, we would not, as us as humans, would never have a health without mental health, and we're all going to go through it at some point. But it's how people interact with it and how people cope with it is what makes the difference in a person. You may have somebody who's out there who's just going to hold it within themselves, not do anything about it, and just kind of suffer through it and try to be the tough guy or tough person and say, "I can handle it. It's okay. I can take care of myself." But then you see their performance or their mental attitude struggle when they're interacting with others, when friends, when they're at work or whatnot, trying to do a small task, and it turns into becoming a big task, and it turns into a big effort because they're not at the 100% capacity, their best health, and they're also not living their best life. And no one wants to see someone struggle. I've gone through a couple days where I've also had struggling sent times during my life here, because I've gone through breakups, I've gone through just tough times in the motorsports world, or I've also gone through a hard time just dealing with either friends or just had a hard conversation with a significant other, if that's the case. Some people are just going through some tough times all the time, and you want to be able to help them, but you just don't know how to. And that's what Racing for Mental Health is about: is people that are going through tough times are able to explain their story, are able to talk about what's on their mind, get it off their chest, and explain what's going on. And then we're able to direct them into the proper help that they need to get them the proper resources, proper programs, um, whether it's been a mental health resource that they have to go to, or it's a behavioral health hospital program that they have to go through. It's just directing people into the right direction so that way they can live their best life, live the way they want to live it, and also not to have as much of a worry in their life as well. Because the last thing you want to have is worry, and the last thing you want to have is something on your mind that's going to be bothering you while you're doing something. You want to be able to do things in a clear mind, and that's the exact same way as driving a race car. You have to have a clear head when you're going into a race car. You can't have anything else on your mind, can't have anything else that's holding you back, anything that's putting you down. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to perform well at your best. So that's the same thing that you have to have in the mental health aspect: is have yourself a clear mind, have yourself a happy, positive life, and you're able to live your best life if you're able to do that.
100%. I think people completely underestimate just the significance of mental health. It is health one way or the other. So, and everybody's got a story, everybody's got a problem, and they may not always show it, as you mentioned, and you don't have to tough it out. So we gotta have those conversations. So it's a huge initiative that you guys have taken on. So R4MH. So check out Racing for Mental Health. And lastly, here, Jordan, I got to ask, because I know you're tight with Graham Rahal. You've driven for him on the
Mhm.
radical side. I don't know if you were able to be at the speedway when Mick Schumacher tested one of the Rahal cars this last Monday. Were you? Were you there?
I unfortunately was not able to take part there at the speedway during that time. I knew about it, and I've obviously wanted to see what was going on. I was keeping close eyes on it from a distance. But from what I've heard, everyone was pretty impressed, and Mick himself was very happy with the way the IndyCar space is like and how the car was handling.
Okay, so this is not tipping any sponsor hands or any driver hands on your side
Mhm.
on the Indy Next deal, but are we going to see Mick Schumacher show up in the Indy Next series next year? I mean, the IndyCar series next year.
That I have no idea on. So that one, I'll tell you what, I have close ties with Graham Rahal and his Graham Rahal performance deal on the radical side. I don't have any close ties with the Rahal Letterman Lanigan side. Although I know everybody from the Rahal Letterman Lanigan side and have some very close niche people that and are very close with the decision makers, I do not know if that's the case. So I could give you one of two guys. It's either going to be Mick Schumacher in the car, or it's going to be Devlin DeFrancesco. That's going to be back in the Rahal car.
Okay, well, when you have that insider information, you call me, right?
You want to be Johnny on the spot with that information, right? You want to be the breaking news
We want to
source.
have breaking news. That's exactly right. All right, Jordan. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't touched on yet in this hour or so that we've been chatting?
I think we've been able to cover everything. Honestly, honestly, it hasn't even felt like an hour and a half. I've had so much fun with this. It's felt like only like 45 minutes, maybe at that most. But no, I think we've
I
touched on
love
a
hearing
lot.
that.
I hopefully, your listeners and your viewers have gotten a little bit more about me, myself as a person, as myself as a driver. And if anybody, that's listening on this show, feel free to come out to a race, show your support for the number 48 Abel Motorsports car. Tell me you were listening to the show and you listen to this podcast. Who knows? We might be able to give you part of a gift. That's the whole part of what Grip is about. Is we love giving out awards. We love giving out gifts and prizes. So if you hear about, who knows? Maybe the next person who tells me that they heard about me on the show and they watched it in person at an IndyCar race, you could be getting a special prize from Grip.
So, speaking of that, where can seventh year over fans and IndyCar fans find Jordan Missig on the vast interwebs with Grip and everything else that you're involved in? Where can they all find you? What's the best way?
So Instagram is one of the best ways. At Jordan Missig to follow me as well. Gripco is also on there. There's also a link to get to the Grip Discord as well. So if you want to enter in on those prizes, opportunities, awards, or giveaways, or even just get involved with the community on iRacing, go to Grip's Discord. There should be a link, I believe, on their Instagram page as well. You can follow me at Jordan Missig Racing on Facebook, on Jordan M Racing on Twitter, which now called X. I do have a TikTok page as well too, so if you want to give that a follow as well, go for it too. Or follow all my latest news and notes on jordanmissigracing.com. Everything is on about me is on that website. All my latest articles, results, everything you need to know about me is on that website.
Jesus, this dude's everywhere. If you can't find him after that, you're completely tech illiterate. So, all right, Jordan, dude, it's been so much fun chatting with you for this last hour. I hope that we have not dissuaded you from wanting to come back and we can talk. Maybe we can do some stuff in person here at one of these races coming up next season. Maybe something else over the winter time. But thanks so much, man. It's been such a great time talking with you and getting to know you a little bit better. I hope all of our listeners appreciated your time and candidness as much as I did. So thank you very much, man.
My pleasure, Kevin. And hell, I'll even throw a proposal opportunity out too. If you want me to come back every week and talk IndyCar racing, the next racing after each and every week, I'll definitely do it. Sign me
Dude,
up. I'm in.
bro, bro, it's a done deal. It's a done deal because we need to do some like takes and some reaction stuff to maybe whether it's news coming up, maybe it's F1 stuff, maybe dude, it's on. We're so doing this.
I'm all
Seventh
for
year
it.
over at fans,
I'm all
you
for
heard it right now. Sweet. I effing love that. That's outstanding, dude. That's
it.
fantastic. Thank you, Jordan. You're the perfect person to do it. And I again, congratulations on the gig for next year, the sponsorship, being able to sign your deal. I hope nothing but the best for you. And dude, I gotta be out of town the better part of the next week. I'm doing hot laps at the Speedway for SRO here the next few days, and then I gotta be at Road Atlanta. But man, when I get back, you and I are on.
I'm up for it, dude. I can't wait to see you at a racetrack in the next coming year, and I look forward to having more conversations with you. This has been fun. It's awesome.
I know it's been a great time, dude. It's been so much fun. Thank you again for the time. Make sure you go ahead and enjoy your grandfather's birthday party this evening. Say hi to mom and
Yep.
dad for me, and we're gonna catch up with you really soon, bro. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me on. Been a pleasure.
You got it, man. All right, seventh year overhead fans. As we wrap this week's episode up, that has been Jordan Missig joining us for the last hour here, Indy Next driver. He's got a great 2026 season on deck. And we want to make sure that if you like what you heard tonight, as well as everything else that we've been doing, make sure you share us with your friends. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button so that you can catch the latest from the greatest spectacle in podcasting. And by all means, stay tuned as well, because some of the stuff that we talked about with Jordan tonight, our next couple of guests that we've got coming up are all going to be geared towards this off season of motorsports marketing. We've got Kelly Flieger, who's a motorsport website designer, coming on to talk about how he can impact drivers' abilities to secure funding. And we've also got the infamous Ralph Howard Hansen, who is kind of the godfather of modern motorsports marketing, very tight with Paul Newman and Mario Andretti. In fact, he was the architect of that famous Kmart livery that you saw in Mario's cars in the 90s. So, with that said, thanks to our sponsors, KrausMeats.com, RespectYourPackage.com with Dick Carriers. And again, stay tuned for the latest in the greatest spectacle in podcasting. See ya.